Hello, my name is Ahmed and today I will teach you about ancient Egyptian burial customs. The ancient Egyptians commemorated persons whose place in the present life had come to an end, and this was true for anyone, regardless of status. Persons of greater importance, such as pharaohs, had lavish burials, while even the poorest Egyptian was given a form of ceremony. It was believed if the deceased were not properly buried, the soul would return as a ghost to haunt the living. Ancient Egyptians held a strong belief in the afterlife, known as the field of reeds or Aru, which was a perfect reflection of one's life on earth. According to Herodotus, an ancient Greek writer, geographer and historian, who wrote that Egyptian burial rites were dramatic.
As regards mourning and funerals, when a distinguished man dies, all the women of the household plasters their heads and faces with mud, then, leaving the body indoors, perambulate the town with the dead man's relatives, their dresses fastened with a girdle and beat their bared breasts. The men too, for their part, follow the same procedure, wearing a girdle and beating themselves like the women. The ceremony over, they take the body to be mummified.
Egyptians held a strong belief with regards to persons' souls, custom dictating that there needed to be a preserved body on earth, in order for the soul to have hope of an eternal life. It was thought the soul consisted of 9 separate parts. The ka needed to exist for the ka and ba to recognize itself, and therefore needed to be preserved as much as possible. There were 3 choices of mummification, with each choice dictating the kind of coffin, the funerary rites available, and treatment of the body.
The brain was removed via the nostrils with an iron hook, and what cannot be reached with the hook is washed out with drugs. Next the flank is opened with a flint knife and the whole contents of the abdomen removed. The cavity is then thoroughly cleaned and washed out, first with palm wine and again with an infusion of ground spices. After that, it is filled with pure myrrh, cassia and every other aromatic substance, excepting frankincense, and sewn up again, after which the body is placed in natron, covered entirely over for 70 days, never longer. When this period is over, the body is washed and then wrapped from head to foot in linen cut into strips and smeared on the underside with gum, which is commonly used by the Egyptians instead of glue. In this condition, the body is given back to the family who have a wooden case made, shaped like a human figure, into which it is put. No incision is made and the intestines are not removed, but oil of cedar is injected with a syringe into the body through the anus, which is afterwards stopped up to prevent the liquid escaping. The body is then cured in natron for the prescribed number of days, on the last of which the oil is drained off. The effect is so powerful that as it leaves the body, it brings with it viscera in a liquid state. As the flesh has been dissolved by the natron, nothing of the body is left but the skin and bones. After this treatment, it is returned to the family without further attention. The cheapest option is to simply wash out the intestines, and keep the body for 70 days in natron.
Once the corpse has been mummified and the tomb prepared, a funeral is held in honor of the deceased and their life. The funeral procession and burial are accompanied by the kites of Nephthys, Jurt, meaning mourners, who were paid to lament loudly throughout the proceedings. This lamenting is meant to inspire others at the funeral to an emotional release, which would help express their grief and therefore echo in the Hall of Truth where the soul of the departed was heading. During the funeral procession, songs are sung by the kites of Nephthys women, often who impersonated the goddesses of Isis and Nephthys. These women need to be pure, and their body hair removed. A common song choice was the lamentation of Isis and Nephthys, which was based on the myth of the 2 sisters mourning the death of the god, Osiris. Hieroglyphics found in tomb scenes provide evidence to modern historians of the presence of dancing and singing by professional performers during the funeral procession, or at the entrance of the tomb. These performing groups are known as Kinnur and consisted of mostly women until the close of the Old Kingdom, where men are depicted. Kinnur troops were sometimes attached to funerary estates and are often involved in Hathoric rites for the deceased. An inscription above the dancers in the tomb of Nebkar proclaims beautiful dancing for your Ka every day. In 5th and 6th dynasty tombs, depictions show Kinnur troops as part of funerary rites, singing and dancing, and invoking the name of Hathor, or her epithet the Golden One. Hathor was widely regarded and was honored as the goddess of the afterlife in the field of reeds. Originally, men and women who died would assume the likeness of Osiris, blessed with his qualities of moral integrity. Given Hathor's rise in popularity, female deceased would assume her likeness and qualities instead, while males continued to be associated with Osiris. Female priestesses were often seen carrying the Menet necklace and the sistrum, instruments of Hathor. Menet necklaces were given as a votive offering to the goddess, while the sistrum was often shaken during funerary rites. It was said to sound like the rustling of reeds, imitating Hathor walking through the field of reeds. In the Old Kingdom, both these items were offered to revive the deceased. Evidence from tomb scenes suggests there were three types of funeral dances. 1. Ritual dance, forming part of the actual funeral rite. 2. Expression of grief, performers placed their hands on their heads or made the Ka gesture, both arms upraised. 3. Dance to entertain the Ka the deceased. Dance in ancient Egypt is seen as an elevation of the spirit of the dancer, as well as the audience or spectators. It is said to be the universal meaning of triumph and suffering. In the Old Kingdom onwards, the opening of the mouth ceremony was performed before the funeral procession or just before the mummy was placed in the tomb. It was considered the most important part of the burial ritual, as it transformed the deceased into Ak. In effect, it allowed the spirit of the deceased to see, speak, hear and breathe, and to receive offerings of food and drink. Usually performed by the Sem priest, who dressed in leopard skin robes, it required the reading of numerous spells and a sacrificial calf. Specifically, spells 21, 22, and 23 of the Book of the Dead make reference to this ritual. The Sem priest falls into a trance and is symbolically awoken by other priests, announcing "I have seen my father in all his forms," with the other priests responding by calling on the Sem priest to take the place of Horus and protect his father Osiris, the deceased. The foreleg of the calf would be brought to the mummy, as it was thought to separate the ba from the body, so the ba could be free once the body was buried. After the tomb was sealed, a funeral feast would occur, usually held right beside the grave, with the soul of the departed believed to be starting out on their journey to the afterlife. While the funerary attendees were feasting, the soul wakes, is reassured and instructed by the texts on the inside of the coffin. The soul is then led by the god Anubis to the Hall of Truth, where the heart is weighed against the white feather of the goddess Ma'at, supervised by Osiris and Thoth. If one's heart weighed heavier than the feather, it was dropped to the floor and eaten by a monster, and the soul ceased to exist. If, however, the heart weighed lighter than the feather, the soul continued on to the paradise of the field of reeds to live eternally. Burial rites were extremely important in ancient Egypt as they believed the soul could not reach the afterlife if the body was not properly buried and all traditional funerary rites performed accurately.